Recording in progress.
One districts. We have consideration of support for town meeting warrant article concerning town planner reporting authority, and we have a vote to support town meeting warrant article 11 master plan implementation. A couple other old business that we may take up at the end, but for now, let's start with the town planner reporting authority. The town manager has graciously joined us. So I'd like to get her out of here early. What they call brownie points. So we've all reviewed the articles on the town planner reporting authority. Chris and Pete's up and ready to go. I just want to make sure. Our Pete Bouchard is attending via Zoom, and our last member, Jim Ball, cannot make it tonight, so there'll be 4 of us. I just don't know if there's any further questions on these. There's 3 articles that we've been asked to comment on or vote on, and I think we've provided comments, and the town manager has revised at least one of the articles based on those comments. So unless anybody has other questions on these, I'm prepared to vote. Hazel, anything? Okay. Pete, do you have anything? I don't know if he's there or not. Kristen, is he muted? Okay. Just want to check in with him. Got any other questions? Can you?
Peter, do you have any questions?
No, Mark.
Okay, great. Thanks, Pete.
Do you hear me, Mark?
I can hear you now. Great. We're going to do a vote on this in a second, so stay unmuted. All right, so there's 3 placeholder articles on the draft warrant. We'll vote those individually, and this will be a roll call vote because it's a hybrid.
I can hear you now. Great. We're going to...
Pete, you might need to mute because of the delay and just unmute.
Articles on the draft warrant.
Can we see if Pete can call into the Zoom and not watch it on TV? Okay, Westboro TV, can you mute? Or the technology is so beyond me.
We had this problem with Jim last week or the week before when he was on Zoom, remember? We had a delay
every time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know. It doesn't sound like it's, we're getting that echo anymore, so let's move forward. All right, so we had 3 placeholder articles. Let's vote them. The first one is numbered Article 20, Charter Change, Section 3-5, Planning Board Composition, Term of Office, Powers and Duties. And I will move that the Planning Board support the article as written in the warrant.
I'll second that.
Any further discussion of the motion?
Pete?
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. Well, we're just making the motion to vote right now, so can I put you on speaker and we can just carry on?
Yeah, you can attend via speaker. I believe that's allowed under.
Okay.
Okay. All right, so Pete.
Be heard.
Pete
Go ahead,
Bouchard,
Pete.
I'll restate the motion for your, we have a motion regarding placeholder Article 20, the charter change on Section 3-5, Planning Board Composition, Term of Office, Powers and Duties. And the motion was, I move that the Planning Board support the article as written in the warrant. And Tim seconded, and that we just have it, seeing if there's any discussion or questions on the motion.
I vote yes.
Okay, I'll do a roll call vote. Pete Bouchard, how do you vote?
Yes, Mark.
Okay. Hazel, how do you vote?
I'm going to vote no, and I'd like to explain why I'll be voting no on all 3 articles concerning the town planner. The planning board is one of 3 elected boards under the charter and is made up of volunteer citizens. It was set up this way so they would have freedom to act and manage their own staff without getting involved in town politics. Some of the board members seem to feel that we are a volunteer board and we should not be involved in supervising and evaluating the planning board staff, and are willing to give the planning board sole authority and willing to give up the planning board's sole authority to hire the town planner. The library and the school board seem to be able to perform the above tasks with their volunteer board members. Why can't the planning board? If our board feels they need help from the town manager to supervise and or evaluate the planning board staff, this can be done by a policy change and would continue to let the planning board maintain their management freedom as set forth in the charter. A charter change is difficult to undo once it is done, and the planning board activities should not be subject to the proposed changes in the bylaws. So I'll be voting no.
Okay. Hazel, in the future, if you could hold your comments to the discussion of an article and not during a roll call vote, I just think that's not the time for
Yeah, but I
comments.
think it's appropriate to
Yeah,
explain why.
when we have a
Yeah,
discussion,
okay.
you can explain that you're going to be voting no, and then state your comments. I think that's more appropriate for the discussion portion. We've just interrupted a roll call vote. We have a yes from Peter, a no from
No.
Hazel. Tim Kaler, how do you vote?
I vote yes, Mark.
Okay, and I'll vote yes as well. That's 3-1 in favor. We are missing a member. I guess this is as good a time as any to see if we want to revote this in 2 weeks when we're a full board. I don't know procedurally, Jim, how does that work?
Well,
Can we
usually
just-
we don't revisit it, but you certainly can. If you wish to revisit it at a future date, you could even revisit it on town meeting floor if you wish.
Well, we have a bunch of articles tonight that we're going to be voting on.
Do the same for each
Yeah,
one
I
of
think
them.
it would be at least courtesy to Jim. One of the last acts he'll do, but more importantly, I think there's some pretty important articles, and I'd like to have a full board vote at some point, so.
Can we agree to vote on town meeting floor when we're all gathered, come early as we do, and we'll be in a
Well,
position?
Jim Ball won't be
Jim
a
Ball's
member anymore,
term will be up at that point.
so,
I thought it was in March.
yeah, so, but I do think we'll all be here on the 1st. Are you going to be here the 1st, Hazel? And you'll be here?
Yes,
Okay, Pete, you'll be here on the 1st?
he's coming in the building.
Oh, okay. Well, so, yeah, I'd like to consider I guess we can take that up. Jim, why don't we put all of these on the next agenda? We vote and when we have a full board.
So we can record this vote.
We can record this vote and any other vote we take tonight, but I would like the opportunity to,
When you get to the public hearings, you're going to want to act on the public hearings, which means,
Absolutely.
okay.
but we can re-vote a vote of support, right? We have to get through and close the hearings first, so. All right, so if everyone's in agreement, I'd like to consider re-voting all of these when we have all 5 of us in attendance. I think that's a good policy for us as a board when we can do that on zoning articles that go before town meeting. All right, next placeholder article. Article, I don't know if it's Article 20 again, but it's the second part of placeholder article, Charter Change Section 5, 3C, Townwide Management Team. Again, any questions on this article?
No, Mr. Chair.
Okay,
I think I expressed my concern.
sure. Yeah, Hazel, I appreciate your concerns. I'm just trying to wait for Pete to enter the building.
Yeah, he hung up, so I assumed he was here. He was riding downhill, so thought it was all virtual.
Bear with us.
Okay.
He's close.
Yeah, he's coming in. He's at the
Great.
church.
He's coming in the building now. If you could just give us a minute so we can get 4 members here.
Kristen, would it be possible to put the ones we're voting on up on your screen? So perhaps- No, the warrant articles. I just think that might be helpful for the public to see what we're voting on, since just giving the name of it, and a lot of people haven't had a chance to review the warrant.
Okay. Yeah, they're pretty, somewhat lengthy.
Oh,
But
they're
I-
not
I-
very long.
Yeah, okay. Well, we'll see. I mean, I
Yeah.
have no issues with putting it on the screen. That's a good idea. Seems like we have time to do that.
Right.
Yeah, no, the echo is,
No, my wife just came home with this, so we made the switch.
no worries, Pete. All right, we'll just
Take a breath.
tell me when you're ready and we'll,
I'm good.
all right. All right, so we're on the second placeholder article, Pete. It's Charter Change Section 5-3C, Townwide Management Plan, and I had asked if there were any discussion or any questions about that article. Everyone's ready to go on that. Do you have any questions?
I'm ready on that one.
Okay. All right, I'll move that the planning board support the article as written in the warrant.
I'll make a second of that motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All right, we'll do a roll call vote again. All those in favor, Hazel?
No.
Tim?
Yes.
Pete?
Yes.
Okay, and I vote yes as well. That's 3-1 in favor of that placeholder article. And the last placeholder article is a bylaw change article to Article 5-1, Community Development Department and Community Development Director. Any questions on this article for the,
No, not at this point.
I've expressed my concerns.
okay. I will then make a motion to approve the article as written in the warrant.
I'll second that.
Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll do another roll call. Hazel, how do you vote?
No.
Pete?
Yes.
Tim?
Yes.
Okay, and I vote yes as well. That's 3-1 again in favor of that placeholder article. Christie, you're welcome to stay, but I appreciate you coming here in case there were any questions.
Christy, sorry for the delay.
All right, next item on the agenda is a presentation of the Westboro Affordable Housing Trust Annual Town Meeting Articles. Ed Bain is here, who's Chair of the Affordable Housing Trust. Ed, I will turn it over to you when you're ready. Begin your presentation, and we'll take. Yep.
I'll let you present.
Yeah, that's a good question. Westboro TV, I'm sorry, can I ask you a question? Are you able to put the presentation on the screen so the people watching at home can see it? Yeah. Okay, great. Okay. Okay.
So how many people?
Ed, go ahead.
Okay, good. First of all, thank you for inviting us tonight. On behalf of the Westboro Affordable Housing Trust, joining me is Alan Edinburgh, who I'm sure you all know is chair of the Select Board, as well as he is treasurer and the representative from the Select Board to the Affordable Housing Trust. So he'll be here to answer additional questions as they may arise if I cannot. So anyhow, we have two articles on the warrant this year. I think they're 19 and 20 or somewhat in that area. I had version 7, so I know they are changing, but basically 20 and 21. Okay, I was close. Anyhow, just to bring you along, I know, first of all, I want to thank the planning board for all the work they help with, you know, when we were putting together the request to form the trust, which we did a year ago, last November, at the 2020 Fall Town meeting. That's when we adopted the state regs in order to form the trust, which allowed us to maintain monies for the improvement, replacement, development of affordable housing within Westboro. So here I just put up some of our mission and principles, nothing really new. This is all on the website, but it's always good to review a few things. So basically our goal, first of all, is, you know, watch 40B, as well as ensure that we have a robust housing stock that is affordable in Westboro, because as you all well know, the cost of living here for both renters and homeowners is quite steep. Here's the list of trustees. Nancy Armitage. Nancy comes with a background of, she's an attorney. She does work in the leasing, more commercial leasing area. Myself, my background is more in IT and finance out of Wall Street. Alan's obviously a man of all trades, but has particular knowledge and insights through mostly self-study of the rules, regs, and the state, regarding state programs, policies, groups, partnerships, et cetera. Leah McLean is actual broker. Hank Rauch, who you probably know from the AFC, is a vice chair. He also has a background being a director of Habitat for Humanity, so he brings some wonderful insight into developing new properties at low cost, affordable housing. And Kate Storm is also a trustee, and she really brings, her background is social work. She brings a wonderful view from the people side of things. You know, we get involved in some of the big numbers and projects and things like that. She always makes sure that we don't lose focus of what this is all about, which is helping people. Okay. Over the past year, we've done a number of things. One of the things that we noticed or recognized, as probably everyone did, was with the pandemic, the hardship that it put on so many renters within town as they lost jobs or their jobs were downsized. So we created a emergency rental assistance program, which helped 16 families over about 12 months, and that the 16 families account for about 50 individuals in total. And we spent about $90,000 on that, and we used Metro West Collaborative to facilitate that, to run it, to take in the applications, vet them, et cetera. And it was always done. People had to, if they were going to receive assistance, and have an application pending with the state with a number of their programs. So we tried to minimize it, but gave them some gap coverage until they could get the state assistance. With that, we've been evaluating a number of potential developments and new developments, rehabs, et cetera, reaching out to different individuals. One that I'm going to talk about tonight is 3 Baylor Road, which is a tax taking. That's one of the articles. We'll talk about that in a minute. And we also put together a number of operational and fiscal management steps. Once again, there's very good oversight by particularly Board of Selectmen and town meeting in the expenditure of funds, especially as we get into any kind of serious numbers. And we've also developed wonderful working partnership with Mass Housing Partnership. They've just been outstanding as far as pointing us, as we've needed guidance, to various agencies and just providing overall consultation. We developed a number of strategic goals. You can see up there, they span over the next 5+ years. In particular, there's programs there which are highlighted by the orange arrows, which I'll be talking about tonight: affordable housing on Rogers Road, the transfer taking, that's the Baylor Avenue property I just mentioned, and a program called First Time Buyer Program, or also known as One Mortgage, which allows first-time buyers some significant discounts on down payments as well as mortgage rates. So those are sort of our 3 focuses, although only the first 2 are relevant to the warrant. Okay, so the first article, or it's actually the second of those 2 that we mentioned, is there's Baylor Avenue, which is just up off of by Lake Chauncey. It's by the beach. It's up in that area of houses to the right as you're going north on Lyman. It was taken by tax lien. It was in tax arrears. The owner apparently had passed away. Property was abandoned, so it is in the state that it is. There's a house, 2-bedroom house there, and some personal property. So what we're asking is that the town approve the article that will allow the select board to transfer the property for the price of about $48,000, per the warrant, to the housing trust.
Ed, does that property back up to Haskell Field?
I don't believe, no, it's in the middle of the block.
But it's in the middle, it's in the middle of the block there?
Yeah, but it's up in that neighborhood.
Yeah.
So by taking that, the trust would then take on ownership of that property, and we would do one of 2 things: either renovate the existing property, depending upon conditions. It does have asbestos siding, so that's definitely a no-no. We'd want to get rid of that. And then after inspections and things, we may decide to completely replace it. In other words, take it down to a slab. It's a slab-based home, and rebuild it in place with that. We have minimal ability to enlarge it. There's about 550, I think, square feet that we could expand to and still honor the setbacks and footprint, et cetera. for that parcel. It would, of course, go into our what's called SHI, which is a subsidized housing inventory. So once again, we would bring on one additional home. And most importantly, as a home, it would be perfect for a first-time buyer. And we would hope to be able to do that by calendar year 2023, so in a year plus. Here are some numbers of what our estimates are. The acquisition, $50,000, which would be that payment in lieu of, to pay the taxes to the town. So the town would get $50,000 from the trust. It would be a transfer there. We expect the renovation or rebuilding to be about $150K, and there's a truck there and some other personal property, probably $5,000. Now, in order to sell the house, there are limits set by DHCD and HUD based upon median income in the area. So the market, the sale has to be about 40% of the market rate. The market rate for homes in that area we've established is about $400,000. So this price would have to be about $170,000 to a buyer, which is obviously that level, that number, even though not an insignificant amount of money compared to the rest of Westboro, would be quite, would be affordable to a first-time buyer, especially if they had some subsidies, such as this one mortgage program I mentioned. So that the net project cost would be a negative 25, which of course would come out of the trust with that. Well, I have just any questions on this, or I can. Why don't we hold questions to the end, and I can always come back to the slide. Okay, the second article is a transfer of money from the Pulte, I'll use the word Pulte Del Webb Stabilization Fund that was set up, it'll be a year plus ago at a March meeting, in order to take the money that was negotiated with Pulte due to the issues surrounding affordable housing, because there was, I'll just use the word, some mix-ups. That development at Chauncey, quick question? Or? No, okay. I'm listening. Okay. We originally had the belief that there could be affordable housing at Lake Chauncey to 10, 15% of those 700 units that they're developing. Unfortunately, because it was only 55 plus, not 62 plus, you have to allow families into affordable housing units there. So they could not, if you will, market the property as senior housing or 55 plus housing. So as part of the negotiations, there was a mitigation decided for about $9 million. And as they complete each building out of the 14, in order to get a certificate of occupancy, they pay the town into that stabilization fund I mentioned, basically 1/14 of that 9 million is about 600 and some odd thousand, 40 some thousand comes in. They initially built Unit 1, and we received that money a year ago plus, and at a year ago November's town meeting, a full town meeting, we voted to transfer that amount of money into the trust. So that's how the trust got its initial infusion of cash. They have now completed buildings 2 and 3. So there's about a 1.2 million plus amount of money in the stabilization fund, because you got to put it into the stabilization fund. The town has to vote to transfer any monies out of resources in the town into the trust. So what this would do is ask that the town do a transfer in the amount listed in the warrant to the trust. What this would allow us to do is to develop, or give us a good start on developing say, apartment complex on Rogers Road, which is down by the senior center. There's a piece of property behind the current Rogers Road properties. And we would look to build approximately 40 units. And these would be primarily small, maybe, one, possibly two, a few two apartment units, very much geared towards seniors. We would make it a 62 plus, affordable unit. So we would bring on 40 new units. Now, in order to do that, what we would do is entice a nonprofit developer, most likely nonprofit, with some if you will, interest-free loans as they go through the pre-permit process, which can save them, I think now rates are anywhere from 5, 7, maybe even higher % to borrow pre-permit money, from banks. So by giving them $500,000 and then getting that back later once the project is complete, that can save them some money. We would subsidize with about a 1.2 million infusion. In other words, we would place that money into the project, which would come out to $30,000 per unit. So we would basically, if you will, sweeten the deal, make the nonprofit, entice them, to build that property. They would get the rents from that property, albeit affordable rents. They would be set at affordable levels, and this would be in perpetuity. So we're asking basically to take most of the money that is in the, if not all the money that is currently in the stabilization fund now, and move that into the trust. So that's the core of that article. And you can see the net project costs. We would be spending about 1.2 million. The first-time homeowners program, not going to go into this in too much detail, but basically by us contributing a certain amount of money along with the state, you can get initial down payments of as low as 3% on properties if you're a first-time buyer and you meet certain criteria. And the mortgage rates are also in that same very low ballpark.
Does the rent go back to the trust?
This would be an ownership.
Oh, yeah.
All right, it would be first-time buyer. So if you're, low income, first-time buyer, like the Baylor Avenue would be a perfect.
If I can clarify, on the first-time home buyers pilot, Mass Housing Partnerships One Mortgage Program has been around for several years. And effectively, if you qualify, it's a 3% fixed interest rate 30-year mortgage with no PMI, and as little, typically between 3 and 5% of a down payment, and their income and wealth qualifications. They're currently running a pilot that's been very successful with the city of Boston, where Boston's Housing Trust is taking people who qualify for the one mortgage or close to qualifying and providing either a subsidy for down payment or paying points to get the interest rate from 3% even lower. And the goal is to take individuals who are at the higher end of affordability, eligibility for affordable housing, and make the lower end of market rate properties affordable to them. And so it really takes the dollars expected out of pocket for a lower moderate income family and extends them to a higher value property that might not normally be available to them as affordable housing. Our plan in the partnership is to do it for first-time low-income home buyers, and Mass Housing Partnership has a definition of what that is, and that would get worked out, but also to make this available to town employees.
We would, as much as possible, like to develop, such as Baylor Avenue, what they call workforce housing, as opposed to more senior affordable housing, meaning it's for people that are hopefully working in town. So, it would be great if a brand new or a young, police officer, DPW worker, who have you, is able to purchase a home at an affordable rate in Westboro, because some of them are just priced out of the market at market rates these days.
Could I just ask one more question?
Sure, Hazel.
I had a couple of questions. One is the piece of property behind Rogers, behind Rogers Road there, is that is the 4 units that you're looking to build there, is that the max amount that can go on that piece of property?
40 units.
What?
They're looking to build 40 units.
Oh, you said 40.
40,
Oh.
40.
Yeah. So
Oh, sorry,
that's an estimate for a multi-story apartment building. The Mass Housing Partnership is offered the Westboro Housing Authority technical services grant, and will be paying for an engineering firm to come in and do a feasibility study that will look at zoning, it abuts wetlands, the engineering of the site itself, the cost to bring the utilities, the rest of the way onto the property, an updated land survey. We believe a couple of the parking spaces for the senior center might be across the parking lot. Not that that's a major issue, but they would come back with a report saying, if you want to do a multi-story apartment building with studios and 1-bedrooms, this is how big you could go.
Are
And
they
they'll all
existing
be
footprint?
rental?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
They'll all be rental units?
These would be rental units. And
62 plus.
And for 62 plus, which would also include people that qualify for certain disabilities that fall into that joint category under the SHI rules from DHCD.
So that was my question on that rent, that income of the rent, where does that go?
So it depends on actually how the project is structured.
Okay.
The most common way these types of projects are being done right now is where the land is sold or land leased to a private developer who then bids on the project and will either build and turn over to the housing authority or build and operate the property as affordable housing. We have a preference, so there's where the money and how the state and federal money flows is a big concern in this. Obviously, we have a preference to have these units at least managed by the Westboro Housing Authority to add it to their inventory. That's essential. Right now, the Commonwealth has guidelines for the minimum size of a housing authority, and our housing authority is beneath that, and therefore has partnered with Hopkinton. It's a tenuous relationship, so we would like to have our housing authority managing enough units to remain and to be fully independent and remain an independent local entity.
And what's that threshold and where do we stand?
We're at 110 units and the threshold is 200.
Do we still
That's
need-
why we went with Hopkinton, who was a similar size.
Yeah, Hopkinton, I believe, is 115 or 120
Right,
units
so
right
by
now.
combining them, we're over the 200.
No, yeah, I was
The
just wondering.
alternative would be to get subsumed by Worcester, which we would prefer not to do. We'd rather, optimally, we would like to, keep the management of the properties. And these are all the properties in town. I mean, there's a number of Beach Street and the Soldiers' Houses, some places on Mayberry, et cetera, that the Housing Authority manages now. They provide.
You mentioned this to be over 55 or over 62?
I think we would have to go over 62.
This would be 62 plus.
62 plus, because that's where we ran into the problem with Pulte.
Right.
If it's 55 plus and it's affordable, you
Yeah.
cannot limit it just to seniors. You have to allow families in. So
Right.
even though these would be smaller units, you could still, have a couple of kids, maybe a single mom or whatever, or dad, and, we don't want it to affect the schools. And just as importantly, we want to provide as many opportunities for seniors in town, because they are very stressed
Right.
in many, many cases with rents.
But you did mention town employees. Is there an exception for town employees?
The town employees relate to the first-time homebuyers program,
Oh, okay.
where
Thank you.
we would establish rules that would allow town employees to participate in that program.
Okay.
Usually by that time, by 62 plus, except for people like this young
Right.
man,
Yeah.
people they've retired and
Right.
they've moved on to greener pastures.
We're jumping around a lot. Hazel, do you have any more questions?
No, I'm sorry.
Okay, Tim, I know you have a question. Why don't you go ahead?
With regard to the single buyer home program?
Yes.
If a buyer defaults within the first few years, where does control does it roll back to the housing trust?
Yes.
No. So the first time home, the
Yeah,
first time
that-
home buyers pilot, the one mortgage process, it's funded by Mass Housing Partnership, but the mortgages are issued through participating banks. And so if one of those homes defaults, it goes through a foreclosure process.
Foreclosure,
Yeah.
so the bank controls that asset.
Do you have a lien on the property to get back what you?
We can, yeah. So we're waiting for a little more data out of the pilot they're running with the city of Boston. In some cases, their housing trust simply made grants to the eligible families to pay points to get the interest rate down from 3% to 2, or even, I think in a few cases, 1.5%. In other cases, they effectively, increased the down payment for the family. And that was done with, 0% interest, but a due on sale clause, so a lien on the property when it's eventually sold.
Okay. Then a question about the rental mechanism. Assuming there's more demand, assuming there's 40 units that go up and the demand is greater, once a buyer qualifies, then the trust run a lottery or?
A lottery is run.
Yes, a lottery is run.
Well, why don't you answer it, because there's a couple of options.
Depending on who's contracted to operate the property, whether it's the developer or the housing authority, or the developer chooses to contract with an accredited third party, it would go through the standard rental lottery process. As far as an affirmative marketing program, names would come off the rental preference list that's managed by DHCD.
Okay.
And would go through that process.
Okay, so it's a transparent process.
It's a transparent process. There
controlled
are,
by
again,
third parties.
depending how the program unfolds, there may be an opportunity to have a local preference for the initial rental of the units. So in some cases, new construction, you can have a local resident preference for a certain percentage of the units for a certain time period. But once those are exhausted, it would just be the straight DHCD lottery system.
Then I have one more. Go ahead. Good. So this is not on the delivery side, but on the upstream side. As trustees, the Affordable Housing Trust manages the assets, the liquid assets, or is accountable for their management?
Yes, and all of the funds are actually administered by under the direction of the finance director of the town.
It's held with.
So they're the custodian of funds.
Yeah, by the finance office.
director.
They invest any surplus funds, or unused funds as we may have, just like they would any stabilization fund or other trust fund that the town has. So everything, every invoice, any expenditures, things like that all go through the finance.
And then the housing trust can work with developers to
Right,
disperse.
we would negotiate with developers, et cetera. But, we would get the town involved as, appropriate, especially,
We do have
zoning and other
circuit
issues.
breakers for oversight. So any project that individually is using 50% or more of the trust's current assets requires a vote of concurrence by the select board. If at any point in time our liability or commitments exceeds 80% of the assets, it would go to town meeting for a vote of
I think
concurrence.
you've covered that before, but
Yeah.
thanks for that
So
reminder.
we have some good, if you will, governors and boundaries in place, to both assure the, particularly the residents of the town, that, the money is well managed and there's appropriate oversight.
Great, thank you.
All right, so.
Questions from you, Pete? Good now. I did have a couple of questions, and I'm sorry.
Sure, Mark.
First of all, the $30,000 subsidy for rents, I'm confused how.
So it's a construction subsidy. So the way affordable housing projects get funded is there's a pro forma cost of construction. The builder, whether it's the housing authority, the trust, or third-party builder, will come up with a budget. And, basically, just like you would any commercial development, say this is what's going to cost to build and operate, and this is the revenue we're going to get from rents. The assumption is that there's financing involved to some degree, and so they need to cover the construction loan and any operating loan. There will be a gap because the
Now,
rent,
all I needed
the
was-
rental
All I
income.
needed was construction, so.
Yeah, so
I didn't know if
our
you were
intent is,
subsidizing
our
the
intent is
rents.
to
I didn't know if you were
contribute.
subsidizing the rents in perpetuity, or if you were just.
No, we're subsidizing the core construction to
Right.
lower the cost of development.
Okay, and then the rents would be restricted in perpetuity.
And we benchmark that off of a number of projects that have happened over the last 2 to 3 years within the Commonwealth for that approximate size, where a typical contribution is about $30,000 per unit.
Okay, that makes perfect sense to me now. And when you explore the site at Rogers Road, are they looking at private sewerage as well as public? given
Or
our-
where,
For the site at Rogers Road?
the engineers are looking at the feasibility with utilities.
Ask them to explore.
We can look, we
Given our-
expect private sewer would be difficult, given the topography of the land and the proximity to the wetlands.
Well, given our sewer capacity, I think
well,
it
Yeah, yeah.
might be-
We'll look back at our DPW director, no pressure.
that might be worthwhile to.
Right,
explore.
our understanding is
Again, I
that
don't know,
in.
It may not be physically feasible, but
Yeah.
it might be worth exploring. So I just wanted to bring that up. All right, I'm sorry, we kind of got sidetracked.
No, that's
Ed, You have more to say, or?
Just a couple things, and then we'll wrap up. I think they'll be quick, but these are all excellent questions. And this does get, as you well know, like you guys, when you work with zoning and stuff like that, you really get into the deep weeds at times, and we do too. This is just a summary of funds. I'm not going to go through in detail here. This is our initial funding, which is what we received from that first payment into the stabilization fund, that 642. These are the various numbers that I've already gone through before as far as what our expenditures would be, assuming we get that requested funding right in the middle, that transfer funding of the 1.285. That would be for those 40 units that we were just talking about, Rogers Road. And you can see the expense there. We would still have $413,000 in the trust to do other work. We're always looking at properties that either we could build on, rehabs, what have you.
And we still have money coming in from Pulte.
We will. They have up to, the plan is up to 14 units, and there are time limits on, not that they have to complete it, but they have to pay us the money, whether they build them or not, over a certain period of time. I don't have what the end date is for,
7 years.
receiving that 99 million. Do you, Ellen?
I believe it's 7 years, but I'm not sure.
Somewhere in that neighborhood.
Yeah, 7 years or 14 buildings,
Right.
whichever comes first.
So whether they're built or not, we will receive that income, Now, not all that is,
Right.
earmarked for the trust. I mean, the town will decide on possibly other projects.
There was another 1.4 million though, right? That was specifically earmarked for this type of funding?
There's another 1.4 million that will come over 3 payments. I want to say it's buildings,
I'd have to look at the special permit on that, Mark.
I think it's after the completion of buildings 4, 8, 4, 9, and 14, I think.
Will that go directly into the trust?
No.
No, I believe so.
Oh, that goes to the trust?
Yeah.
Okay.
It was
Because that was
earmarked
specifically
for
only for affordable housing. Right,
period.
right.
All right, so that, even when you're down to 413, you have that to look forward to.
Right, as
That
time
seems-
progresses.
Seems promising to me, guys. That's really good work.
So that's a summary, and so basically, this is just a summary. We're asking the planning board, if you'd be so kind, to vote in favor and support these articles, these 2 articles for both the transfer of the funds from the stabilization, as well as the authorizing the select board to sell for that 50K, the Baylor Avenue property to the trust.
Any other questions from the
I
board?
just had one, which is a little looking forward. Are there sort of any other areas in town where you have kind of looked at and said, well, maybe this is a developable spot and we can do something there?
So we're actually, in the recent past, we've actually reached out to, I think in 3 occasions, we've reached out to the owners of homes in town that are currently vacant to see if they're interested in all 3 of those homes are in need of significant repair, to see if they were interested in selling so that we could convert them. We have, one of our members is investigating a piece of town-owned property north of Route 9, also is a potential for new construction of a single family or a duplex, a small piece of property. And we're, constantly on the lookout for properties that might come to market that might be viable for us. It's a tough, we had a couple of properties where, within hours of seeing the listing, one of the trustees reached out and the property was already under agreement. So.
Yeah, so we generally can't just go
Happening
up the
now,
realtor
so.
list. They
Right,
just
yeah.
go, if they're marketable properties, they're just going to get snapped up. But if people see anything, you got a number.
But we're each month, initially the commitment of the trust is that we meet quarterly or more frequently as necessary. We've met every month since our creation to
Third
keep these
Thursday of the
projects
month.
moving forward. And each month there's a property or 2 that we look at as a possible and we do a little exploration on to see what could work.
Right. And there are other projects we're doing to try to keep things on the subsidized housing list, working with some other developers. Right now, we're in negotiations, can't get into that.
Great, thank you.
Anything else from the board?
Mark?
Jim Robbins, did you have anything? Okay.
Nothing.
I just wanted to give you a chance. Okay, Tim, do you want to?
So for Article 20, Westboro Affordable Housing Trust funding, I move that the planning board support the article as written in the warrant.
Second.
Any discussion of the motion? We'll do a roll call vote. Do we have to do a roll call vote
Not
on a
anymore.
hybrid?
No, I
Since
keep
we're all in a.
No, you're all present.
Okay, all those in favor? That's 4-0 in favor. Go ahead, Tim.
Article 21, transfer of property to the Westboro Affordable Housing Trust. I move that the planning board support the article as written in the warrant.
Second.
Discussion, all those in favor? Again, that's 4-0. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Very much.
Thank
And we
you.
would hope that you would at town meeting.
What you're doing.
We'll be able to call on you to, once again, announce your support. Thank you so much for all you do for our town.
All right, next item on the agenda. Since I was courteous to the town manager, I feel like I should be courteous to the DPW director. Chris Payant, do you want to go next? Okay. All right, so we'll take up the public hearing for zoning dimensional regulations for projects in M1 district, particularly town water tanks at 143 Ruggles Street and Fay Mountain. Since this is a public hearing, I have to read the legal notice into the record. Let me just find that. Okay, legal notice of the town of Westboro, Office of the Planning Board, notice of public hearing. The town of Westboro Planning Board will hold a remote public hearing via Zoom Tuesday, February 15th, 2022 at 6:30 PM on 2 articles to appear on the warrant for the March 19th, 2022 Westboro Annual Town Meeting. Information on how to access the Zoom link can be found on the Planning Board agenda for the February 15th meeting as posted on the town website. To see if the town will vote to establish the dimensional regulations as required under Article 2, District Regulations, Section 2600, Dimensional Schedule, subsection 2630, Building in M1, District M1 of the Westboro zoning bylaws for the town-owned properties located at 143 Ruggles Street, also identified on Assessor's Map 9, Parcel 131, and off Adams Street, also identified as on Assessor's Map 4, Parcel 20, on which the Ruggles and Fay Mountain water storage tanks are located. The purpose of establishing these regulations is to create building and site work envelopes to allow the construction of chlorine booster buildings and associated site elements within the envelopes. The dimensional regulations for the sites, including any required future construction, are proposed as follows: minimum front yard 0, minimum side yard 0, minimum rear yard 0, and maximum structure height 35 feet. Copy of the entire proposed zoning articles and corresponding plans are on file and can be viewed at the offices of the Westboro Planning Board and Westboro Town Clerk during their business hours. Any person interested or wishing to be heard on the proposed article should attend the public hearing indicated above. And that was in the Telegram and Gazette on January 28th and February 4th. I will turn it over to you, Chris, or, I'm sorry, I didn't get your name.
It's Joe Boccadoro.
Joe, I've seen your name before.
I'm the assistant town engineer.
Haven't met you, so, okay.
I also want to point out Chris, representative from the DPW as well, our director, and Josh Van Houten, our water and sewer operations manager, who's participating remotely. So I have a few slides that I want to go through, and then we'll be happy to answer any questions you may have. So we're here tonight to...
Since you bring the mic a little closer. Yeah.
Is that a little better? Yeah.
Much better. Thank you.
So we're here tonight to talk about the chlorine booster buildings that you mentioned and placement of them on 2 M1 sites, and to look for your support on some town meeting articles that we have on the warrant, and setting dimensional regulations as well on these sites. As you'll hear in a few minutes, a few years ago, we had some problems with maintaining chlorine residual in our water distribution system, and these chlorine booster buildings will help us maintain regulatory compliance. So that's why they're important, critical items for the town's infrastructure network. So the 2 sites in question are shown on the slide overhead. The Fay Mountain site to the south, which is just off of Adams Street and Isaac Miller Road, and also the Ruggles site, which is off of Ruggles Street, just north of Wayside Road. I'll get into the details of the chlorine booster buildings in a minute, but I wanted to take a few minutes just to talk about our water system. Like many municipalities, Westboro's water system is made of some sources of supply, some treatment, distribution, and storage. And as far as supply is concerned, the photo in the bottom right shows our surface water supply, Sandra Pond, and the photo above that one shows a typical water well. This one happens to be Moore Street, but there's a dozen or so others of them just like it. This is a groundwater supply source. And the surface water supply and some of the groundwater supplies are pumped to our water purification facility off of Fisher Street, which is the photo in the top left. But in all cases, before the water is sent back into the distribution network, it's chlorinated. And to control any bacterial growth that may occur in the system before it's used by the businesses and homes that are connected to the distribution network. In all cases, it's good operational practice to maintain a certain chlorine residual, as I mentioned. But we struggle to do that in the southern portion of the system. A few years ago, we had a outbreak of, or I should say a high chlorine level, a high bacterial level in the water tank that's in the bottom left. And the tank was drained and cleaned, and a temporary booster system was installed at the water storage tank that you see there in the bottom left. DEP was okay with the temporary system, provided a permanent system was put in eventually. And they've reminded us the last couple of years that that permanent system is needed, and that's what these chlorine booster buildings will house as the permanent equipment that the DEP has asked for. Well, here's the Fay Mountain site. The approximate location of the chlorine booster building is shown in the red rectangle. The building location is approximate because design is still ongoing, very early in the process, and that rectangle could drift around on site in terms of its actual location based on how the design goes. So what we're asking for essentially is everything in the crosshatch area to possibly place this building, plus any future appurtenances and buildings to help maintain compliance. Here's some photographs of the tank again. Photo to the left is looking east up the access road to show a little bit of a distance shot of the tank itself. And the photo on the right is a close-up shot showing about where the building is proposed to go. Again, keeping in mind that the design process is very early and the building can move around a bit, but that's about the location. That's the optimal location of the building, but again, it could move around. So this is the Ruggles site. It's much like the Fay Mountain site in terms of the red rectangle showing about where the chlorine booster building will go. But the crosshatch area representing the building and construction envelope to take into account that the building may move around. And as the project progresses toward construction, that the contractor might need some of the site for a laydown area and possibly placing of a temporary construction trailer, something of that nature. Some additional photographs. The photograph on the right, again, is a distant shot of the Ruggles tank, showing about the alignment, if you imagine in the center of the photograph, a pipe buried underground that leads to the tank. And the photo on the left, where those folks are standing, is approximately where the building would go, as close as possible to the pipe that's underground. But again, it could move around a bit depending on the details of design. So this shows a typical prefabricated building, which is what's proposed on the site. And will be a precast concrete building, much like this one. About 8 foot by 12 foot would be the dimensions. The architectural treatments haven't been set yet, so it may have a brick veneer, it may have more of a siding, but the double doors will be something that will be viewed. And this building will house the chlorine booster equipment, piping, metering pumps, equipment to measure the chlorine as it's entered into the piping before it goes into the tank, and that's the idea, to inject the chemical into the piping as it's drawn into the tank. And some very small chemical storage tanks, probably less than 30 gallons of chemical storage at each site. So here are the two articles that are on the warrant right now that essentially the wording that you read describes the sites a little bit and the nature of them, and a building needs to be placed on them, including any future buildings that might be needed to support regulatory compliance. And what both articles ask for, one for each site, is minimum front yard, side yard, and rear yard set at 0, and a maximum structure height of 35 feet. That's the building itself, 35 feet. And the reason for the 0 setbacks, again, is to maintain that flexibility in the event that the buildings need to move around and that a building might need to be placed there in the future. But these are small buildings, 8 by 12 footprint size, as I noted earlier. So we can open up to questions now.
Questions from the board?
Why is the height 35 feet for the building that we saw?
That's the maximum height. It won't be 35 feet. 35 feet will be, it's the upper limit. The building won't be 35 feet.
Seems odd. Fine.
Yeah, I question whether you might get somebody push back on that at town meeting. Just, I'm okay with it because I don't think you're going to build a 35-foot tall building, but you might want to just one story.
Yeah, it will be, exactly.
If there's justification for it in the future, like the need for equipment that would rise to the tower height or something, then that would be a reason. You know, it would be good to have a rationale for why it's that big when we look at that building. Again, I have no objection to it. It's just odd.
Push back against a 3-story building at both of those locations. It might be worthwhile reconsidering the story height end of it.
I mean, it's not a hill to die on, but it's just odd.
I think it's a valid point.
Go ahead.
Yeah, just to try and help this out a little bit and explain why Joe would have a higher maximum structure, is that in the future, if the town needs to put another structure there, or the town needs to put another tank there, these dimensional regulations are in place, and it serves them so that they don't need to come back to town meeting. We've recommended similar things in other circumstances where there's been an M1 project that the town is going to build, particularly at the schools. Also, we've had recreation fields. So you would think, oh, we're going to build a field, we don't need much height. Well, you really don't for the field, but if you put in a backstop or you put in risers for a grandstand, you're going to need that height. So we recommended to Joe and to Chris and the DPW and Recreation Department and other departments, school department, in the past, that they look at having a higher maximum height. That's also why they have 0 setbacks. Yeah, because as you know, it's not about the structure that's going to be at the lot line. It's about laydown of materials. It's about moving earth. It's about putting up a fence, things like that. So that's why that is.
Yeah, I guess my answer to that, though, would be if the DPW wants to go to 35 feet, they could come back to change the dimensional regulations again. But I think the town would be interested to know that they're planning to, in that circumstance, put a 3-story building. I would be more comfortable with a typical story height, 1-story height, whatever. Mind giving some leeway. 35 might be controversial. Just trying to predict what you'll hear at town meeting.
Because what's the expected life of the building, right? So we're talking,
If it's made of brick, it's probably got a pretty good life.
Yeah, exactly. So realistically.
I thought your point around actually replacing the water tower or something is, no, that's not envisioned now, but if the point is we're giving the town flexibility to use that site as they need to look at installing technologies to maintain the water system, then that's a rationale for giving, kind of a larger volume, including the 0 setbacks without need for further regulation. But it is a little bit of a switch to look at an 8x12 building and then see 35 feet. So.
Jim, did you have another comment?
Yeah, the other point on this, and it's actually probably more important, is that even if they did need to replace the water tank or build a 3-story structure to support the water tank, they'd have to come back to town meeting to raise and appropriate the money. This only sets the dimensional regulations for the structure. So if in the future they needed to replace the water tank, they'd be back at town meeting anyway to get the money to do it. So the town would be discussing the structure at that time.
How does that work in a grant? Would they still have to come back to town meeting to?
Yeah, so, well, yes. Generally, the town meeting will vote to give the select board the authority to receive and spend the grant. They don't vote the reception and the expenditure of the grant. They give the selectmen the authority to decide on that.
I guess as long, my feeling is as long as there's due notice to the town if something besides what they're proposing here is going up, then I'm comfortable with the kind of open-endedness of the I don't want to say open-endedness, but leniency of those setbacks and story heights. I just want some assurance that besides this is built, the town's going to have some notice. That'd be my only concern. But I have no desire to really change the wording of the article. Somebody can make a motion on town meeting floor. I don't see the need to do that. Else? Everybody ready?
Yeah. Want me to read it?
Oh, I'm sorry, this is a public hearing, though.
Oh,
Is there
right,
anybody
the
from the
public.
public? Any comments from the public? Kristen, anybody here wishing to address this subject? Okay, no emails. All right, then, we need to close the public hearing. I will make a motion to close the public hearing on the zoning dimensional regulations for project in M1 district, particularly town water tanks at 143 Ruggles Street and Fay Mountain.
I second that.
Heard Hazel seconded first. Pete? Any discussion of the motion? All those in favor of closing the public hearing? That is 4-0 in favor. Go ahead, Tim.
So, with regard to establishing dimensional zoning regulations for building an M1 district, Ruggles water tank, chlorine booster, I move the planning board support the article as written in the warrant.
Second.
Hazel got the second. Any discussion? All those in favor? That's 4-0.
Ready? With regard to establishing dimensional zoning regulation for building an M1 district, Fay Mountain, water tank, chlorine booster building, I move that the planning board support the article as written in the warrant.
Second that.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor? And that's 4-0 in favor.
Thank you.
Thank you. You have
Thank
a
you.
nice night. Nice to meet you, Joe.
Yes, likewise, thank you, appreciate it.
Next item on the agenda, gentlemen, thank you for your patience, is a public hearing for 9 Otis Street site plan review application. Once again, this is a public hearing, so I will read the legal notice into the record.
There.
Legal notice, Town of Westboro for site plan review hearing pursuant to the rules and regulations relative to site plan review under section 1240 of the zoning bylaws of the Town of Westboro. The Westboro Planning Board will hold a public hearing on Tuesday, February 15th, 2022 at 6:30 PM on a plan to expand the current uses at 9 Otis Street in Westboro, Mass. The Planning Board hearing will be held remotely via Zoom. Information on how to access the Zoom link can be found on the Planning Board agenda for the February 15th meeting as posted on the town website. 9 Otis Street LLC, DBA Doug Curtis Landscape is seeking approval for the construction of a new facility at 9 Otis Street. The project will include the construction of a 35,000 square foot building and a parking lot with associated drainage and utilities. The new building will be a multi-tenant facility for a gym, contractor's yard, and warehouse space. Any person wishing to be heard should appear at the time and place recited above. A copy of the application and plan are available for review in the Westboro Planning Board offices at 45 West Main Street, Westboro, Massachusetts, and the Town Clerk's office at 34 West Main Street, Westboro, Massachusetts, during regular business hours. And that was published in the Worcester Telegram and Gazette on January 26th and February 2nd. All right, Jim Robbins, do you want to do an introduction on this, or should we go straight to the applicant?
Sure, I'll do an introduction while Vito's setting up. As you know, 9 Otis Street is currently occupied by Curtis Landscaping. This project is an addition to the current development on site. There is a building there right now that occupies several uses, DHL shipping. There is an indoor recreation and fitness facility. Also, there's a couple offices. The structure housing those facilities will remain. This is a proposal for a new structure, which you're about to see, in addition to the existing, and that will house the landscape business, their equipment, and possibly another tenant as well.
Yeah, so it's likely that the back building would be the landscape company, potentially the recreation facility in the front moving to the back, and then another third tenant space in that back building.
Okay. So Vito, I'll ask you to introduce yourself and.
It's Vito Colonna with Cornerstone Engineering and Phil Curtis.
The Doug Curtis Landscape.
So this is the existing site right now. It's over at 9 Otis Street. So it's right off Otis. The MBTA rail line is to the south bottom part of the page. So they abut right up to the rail line. And overall, it's about 27 acres, 26 acres. And right now, as you were just talking, it is developed with this existing building down in the front that has their offices, DHL, and the athletic training center. And they have existing paved parking, around the sides. The building's kind of set back off the road. They have a fairly long driveway getting down there. And then in the back here, a couple of years ago, I don't know if they came to planning. I know it went through conservation to get this storage yard approved in the back out in here. They did. So this is that large storage yard. It's a gravel surface right now out in the back there. They have wetlands around the perimeter in that darker green color. So we are before conservation also at the same time. We've had one meeting there. The next one's in 3 weeks, I believe, somewhere around there. So there was some infrastructure put in during the time of this yard. They put in a large detention basin in the back and some smaller ones up on the sides. So the proposal itself is to construct a new building in the back over in here. And the building itself, it's a 200 by 175 foot building. So it has a footprint of about 35,000 square feet. It would be some warehouse space on the first floor. There's also some mezzanine space above where they'd have some offices. So it'd be 39,500 square feet total of floor space within the building. And as I said, it would be a 3-tenant building most likely, with them moving their business operations to the rear in the back here. And as you can see, there's a lot of parking proposed around the building. Up front is more visitor office space type parking and for the general use of the buildings, also on the side over here. But then up in here is more their operations where they'd be storing more of their equipment, the trailers. That's why these look a little longer. They're 50-foot long bays each, and that could fit a full-size truck with their trailer and all their equipment on it. So we have given them this sufficient space, a large turning aisle to be able to maneuver the trailers in and out. Up in here also, I didn't mention, there's the power lines. There's an easement up in here. So that's why the building was kind of pushed there, and we just have parking under the power lines. So we're trying to utilize that area, but still, respect the rights of the easement that go through there. We did look at also the turning radiuses for the fire truck to run through as far as our driveways and everything goes. So that's part of the package here. We did route the largest fire truck through their ladder truck. They gave us the template for that. So we did show that routes through the site. It can circulate around the building, kind of come back out and through, just to verify that it can get through everywhere. As far as layout goes, the only other thing to mention was that we also have a loading dock in the back here. So the building itself was graded, so this is all flush up in the front, and then it steps down, and this backside has a 4-foot reveal on it, so we can utilize that as a loading dock area. And it also fits with the grade a little bit, because as this grade drops off, we kind of match that and give a loading area out there. As far as utilities go, we have existing sewer pump station up in the corner, kind of up in here, and we're proposing to connect a new line down to that pump station, and that pumps up through an easement off-site up to the north. We've talked with DPW a little bit about this, and we're looking at maybe combining these lines into one, but we have a couple items to work out with them as far as verifying the pump sizes and stuff like that, just some construction items, not, big picture, whether the connection works. As far as you see water service, there is water that comes down to serve this new building. However, we don't think it's the proper size to be able to service hydrants and fire protection, so we're going to bring a new 8-inch line down from Otis Street all the way to the new building. You have fire protection, new hydrants. There's no hydrants on site now. I think all that was reviewed by fire department and part of the package, and I don't think they had any issues with the fire protection, hydrants, in all those locations. We also have gas and electric on site, extended up to the new building. As far as stormwater goes, there was an existing large basin down the bottom, and when we modeled it, we showed that we had to expand that because of the conversion from the gravel surface to the impervious pavement, and there's an expansion in the footprint. So we expanded that basin out as far as we could. We're still respecting the setbacks to the wetland buffers. And this was large enough throughout here to mitigate this increase in impervious and development area. All that it's under review through, I think Ty and Bond was the review for the town. I know they had numerous comments in there, but we probably won't want to go through all their comments tonight. But some of the big takeaways from that is that it basically complied with the stormwater standards. There's a lot of dotting I, crossing T's that we have to finish up with them. But the big picture of it was that it complied with the standards. We also provided a landscape lighting plan. And the site, basically, we've provided some landscape islands around the building, landscape up in the front. And then around the basin areas, we provide some native seed mixes, some vegetation, trying to clean that area up, stuff that's suitable for stormwater down in that area. All the pole heights are at 20 feet maximum, trying to keep the heights down with hooded, dark sky compliant type shades. Provide the photometric plans to just show compliance with no offsite spillover. Not that we're near any property lines or anything like that would really have to be concerned with, but just to verify that we have sufficient lighting on site and that it isn't going to be spilling out onto the abutting properties. Really kind of an overview of everything. I can turn it back over to the board for any questions, comments.
All right. Does anybody have questions to start?
I just wondered what the present building is going to be used for.
So this building, once they move out of there, DHL is still in there, but I guess Phil can.
DHL still in there. It'll ideally be a single-use space or a single-tenant building. We don't have the whole thing leased out when we move out, but the idea is to get a single tenant to take the whole space.
And what is the height of the new building?
Right now, it's not going to be over 40 feet. We proposed a maximum of 40, but right now, I think we were at 34 feet. I think that's what
I believe it's a 24-foot clear height, and then it's a low pitch coming in, so I think it was around there. It was in the low 30s.
So we set a maximum of 40 feet through our application.
Do you have the plan that has the zoning table on it?
Yes, if I could. Look at the screen. So there we go. Zoning table's over in that corner.
Oh.
There we go.
There you go. Thank you.
Took me a minute there. So we proposed a maximum of 40 on that.
They're allowed 60 feet in that
Right.
district.
Yeah.
Do you plan on using any green technology, or how do you plan, like solar? Or?
So the front building now has solar on it. We've had conversations with the company that services the solar system about the back building, but it's just in the beginning stages, so.
Something you'd be open to, though?
It's something we'd be open to, yeah. Yep.
Questions? So Jim, we had a list of department comments. Has the applicant seen those? Have you seen the?
Yep, we did get a copy of those.
The snow storage comment, have you addressed that?
We didn't submit any new plans yet. We figured we'd get your comments first and then do one kind of batch of everything. But we can address those. I think that was the snow storage up in this kind of area here, so we'll just move that, away.
And then Conservation had commented on screening for neighboring lots, I believe.
Yeah, that was,
There's a residential neighborhood right behind there.
yeah, that was up in this area. I didn't see they said it was part of the previous approvals.
It was, yeah.
I didn't research that to find the old approvals yet, but I think that was up in this
I think
kind of far
regardless of
corner.
whether it's in the old one, I would encourage some neighborly screening there.
Yep.
Lessen the impact on a residential neighborhood next door. Same elevation,
Yeah, so we can get that onto the landscape plan.
35, 40. Obviously, people want their privacy.
Definitely.
Active Transportation also had requested to be part of, discussions on a trail easement along Otis. I don't know how you feel about that. They're trying to get a safe school grant, and that would be part of it.
Yeah, they were looking essentially to widen the sidewalk along the street, correct? Yeah, which is certainly something that we'd be open to.
Asking you to, I don't think they're asking for you to construct anything, they just want the easement.
Easement for, yeah.
I'll have a comment on that when you get to that, when you're done. I'll
Okay,
reserve my
go
comment.
ahead, Jim, I think that was my last
Yeah,
one.
so I think that's a good point to bring up. So I want to talk about two things, actually three things, two of them are related. But to address the multi-use trail, there is a sidewalk out there today that's usable, and widening it, I think, will be possible to an extent. There is a slope that you're aware of, you know well, because it's your property. And there's a guardrail on that property currently on both sides of the driveway. There will be limitations on what they can do for the width of the trail, and we've always talked about the width of the trail. So to their best of their ability is what I would request, to widen the sidewalk as long as they can maintain a 3-to-1 slope in any of the area that they grade. So it's going to be difficult to maintain a 3-to-1 slope. So if someone falls, they're going to have to move that guardrail to widen it at all. Because in one point, the guardrail's literally at the back of the sidewalk. So we should talk about that with staff to see if you think you can do that, Vito.
Are you suggesting that we ask them to do that work now? I thought that would be done by.
I want to talk to them about what can be done there now. Yep. They may not need to do the work, but the grading needs to be achievable, is what I'm saying. It's an engineering exercise, is what it is. You may not actually have to do the work. I want to make sure that the request that's being made by the town is achievable. Otherwise, it's a waste of time. The second one is multi-part. It has to do with the lighting and the landscaping. The approval many years ago, many years ago, had plantings in the area where your detention basin is. You obviously need to do that basin, so you can't do the plantings there. You may be able to, and I say may because I want to leave that up to the Conservation Commission. That was what Sherry made for a comment. When they give you an order of conditions, they'll address that. We've already talked about it, Sherry and I. If the plantings will work, we'll want you to comply with the order of conditions. So when we approve the site plan, I'm just going to say comply with the order of conditions from Conservation. So you work that out with them.
Okay.
And then the point to having the plantings is to screen your abutters to the rear along Mohawk Drive. And there are a couple residents that back up to your property line. They're quite a ways away, but because of the elevation of the site, they can see your site. And the previous owner when they came in, they wanted to do a subdivision here at one time. I don't know if you were aware of that. They wanted to do an industrial subdivision with 3 lots. One lot was going to be given to the town, and that's actually transpired, and then 2 different lots for one new building, which you're doing. You no longer have to do a subdivision to do multiple buildings. But at the time, the neighbors came in. That's probably what Mark is thinking about, because you were probably on the board when we did that subdivision. Right. The Mohawk residents came in and they were concerned about the visibility to the site. So my second comment on that is the full cutoff lighting is really important, that we maintain that 20-foot height as a max. And so the line of sight from any site lighting in your parking lot to the rear and the east, and the east is important. So if you can minimize, your lighting plan was really good, by the way, but if you can minimize any wall packs on the back of that building so that it doesn't spill any light towards the residential neighborhood. Full cutoff light packs, downward shielded, and maybe remove the lights along the rear of the site. They're not major things. If anything, it'll save you money rather than cost you money on lighting.
Okay, so you're suggesting removing the lights on the building that would face Mohawk, essentially?
Or
that would
shield
be-
them, downward shield them, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
Do you have a door at the rear of that building? I'm trying to remember. You have one, right?
We do. I think there's 6 garage doors actually that
Oh, you
line the
do?
back of the
Okay.
building, yeah.
Yeah,
There's
so you're
6 driving
the
bays.
building code's going to require you to have the lights. Okay.
What are your hours of operation normally? Like, I know it's a landscaping business, so it's 8 probably, or 8, 9 in the summer, right?
So actually in landscape season, it's, closer to 5:36 when people start to come in, and basically 6 PM is when the trucks
so
would usually come in at the end of the day.
All right.
So I had one more question I didn't think of before. EV charging on site of the new building, do you have any plans to install at least EV charging infrastructure, or?
Yeah, we at least provided the infrastructure. We're going to have connection boxes ready. Yep. Jim recommended that at our meeting. So we're going to pre-wire these just so they're ready anyway, at least the
How many
conduit.
total spaces in that new?
5.
7?
Yeah, we
37
have,
plus those.
forget how many new we have. Oh, I'll zoom back in. We have 198 new spaces and 63 truck spaces.
And we're providing 4 EV chargers.
Yep.
Are you putting in level 2 charge stations or just infrastructure?
Just infrastructure, just so you'd be ready if you were to be put them in. So everything's already there.
And no infrastructure for the trucks along the building? You'll have to come back in the future to do that then, which you will. Aren't they outlawing gas-powered blowers? That'll be the first.
It's trending in that direction.
You seasonal operation, or do you have a substantial presence in this time of year?
We do snow and ice removal, but most of our staff is seasonal.
Okay. Just obviously with the foliage this time of year, that would be the time I'd be most concerned about the neighbors. Noise, obviously, especially with the trucks entering on that side. So I don't know that we would need fencing. That might be something we want to. Oh, it gets expensive.
Well, I think it depends on how far away the residential, looks on the map that the residential areas are quite a long ways away, so I think that it would be a matter of trying to figure out what sound would carry and how it would carry and what effect it might be before we even thought any further than that. But there's quite a distance between that building and the nearest residence.
Let's see.
Looking for the scale on this map.
Doesn't have the abutments.
Mohawk Drive's a long way away.
Yeah, the 2 homes at the end of Mohawk Drive are not that far from this. I don't have a scale on the GIS map. I don't want to guesstimate how far they are, but
Does the operational footprint of the landscaping business expand a lot I will say that the number of truck spaces there is just a lot to me. Is that each one of those, you know, like the typical landscape truck and trailer going in and out every day?
Yeah, and they do have extra. They're planning for growth by moving into this new
Yeah.
facility. So it's more than they need today, but they're kind of.
You know how many vehicles are parked in the site now?
So approximately 30.
Okay. And so what was the truck increase? 96?
There's 63 truck spaces, I believe.
More than doubling.
Can you go back to the fire radius? Is that gray line represent the path of the fire truck?
Yep, yeah, that's the fire truck. That's the overhangs and everything.
I don't know that it's really an issue. I'm not an engineer, but fire truck is almost certainly going to be coming from the other
Oh, yep, yeah. So this entrance.
You'll still be able to make that turn.
Yep, you'd still be able to make that. Yep.
I find it unlikely that they would
should've
go out
gone
to
the other
Route
way.
9 and back, so. Just wanted to make sure that was considered. Again, I'm not an engineer. All right, anything else from the board? Jim, anything else?
No, I think that the issues with their neighbors will be settled during the conservation hearing.
All right, what outstanding, any questions from the public on this?
Schedule-wise, I intend to write a draft for your next meeting, and I will be working with fire and conservation to make sure that they're okay with this plan. And if they have any contingencies, they'll see the decision before it comes for vote.
We're going to leave it open, though, because there's.
Yep,
quite a
I'd
few
leave it
outstanding
open.
issues. All right. I'll make a motion to continue the public hearing on 9 Otis Street site plan review application to
March 1.
March 1st at 6:30.
Second.
Discussion of that motion? All those in favor? That's 4-0 in favor of continuance. Thank you guys for coming in. Welcome to the town, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next item on the agenda is a continued public hearing on a town meeting article to see if the town will vote to amend its zoning bylaws, Article 4, special regulations by creating a new section 5900 Industrial E Overlay District.
Thank you, Vito.
We discussed this at length at the last meeting. I think the main reason we left this open was due to the technological issues that we had at the beginning of the meeting on the Zoom. So I don't want to belabor this. I just really left it open, was hoping to leave it open in case any public comments came in, either in person or via email. Any communications from the public, Kristen, on this? No. Does the board have any other questions on this article?
Could you just give a brief summary for anybody who
Sure.
might be watching?
Jim, would you do that?
Which one are we looking at, the industrial E? Okay, sure. I have the PowerPoint if you want to see that, but I think that the most important thing to remember is that with industrial E, we're overlaying the existing industrial B district, which allows 40% coverage, requires 60% open space, allows 4 stories, and a height of 60 feet. We would be increasing that to 5 stories and a height of 85 feet maximum, and that would include any mechanicals on the roof. So if you had HVAC, any chillers, anything like that on the roof, that would have to be included in the maximum height. So it's basically a bonus of an additional story and a reduction of open space by 10%. So we're going 50-50, 50% coverage, 50% open space.
And this is on the Otis Street.
This is Otis Street from the intersection with Route 9 to Smith Parkway. And the reason that we didn't go all the way down to Fisher Street is because of residential abutters. The distance down Smithville Parkway would be just the first property, number 10, Otis Street, which actually has frontage on both Otis, and Smithville Parkway. It's currently used by Columbia Tech. That would be the only property on Smithville Parkway that would be in the overlay. However, it does include all the properties on Secaucus Drive, so that's Coca-Cola and the other industries on Secaucus Drive, and it includes the 4 lots at the top of Boston Hill that are currently zoned Industrial B.
Those are accessed off of Valenti Drive by the Y, right?
Correct.
No access to,
No, they're all accessed from Route 20 on Valenti Drive. And the frontage of Route 20 is actually in Northborough. So you come up the road probably 200 feet and you enter Westboro.
right. All right.
I had some comments.
Okay,
Are we still
please.
taking comments?
Yeah, no, the
this?
discussion is still open. Go ahead.
Okay, all right. At the last meeting, we talked about some mitigation. We might look at this. I noticed that there was no change in what we're voting on at the moment. I think this would be a real lack. I'd like to see something in any change that we had that talked about mitigation, which I think is terribly important in this particular area where we're now talking about decreasing the open space and increasing the size of the building envelopes. I was interested on listening to Curtis this afternoon, tonight, that their building actually is going to be 40 feet. I believe that the 60-foot limit at the moment, which is I think what it is, giving an additional 25 feet to buildings along Otis Street will change the entire character of that particular neighborhood. I feel strongly that tall buildings should be in the over on the east side of town where we have Computer Drive and larger developments. I think it will impact the residential area negatively, and I would, at this point, like to see some more work done on this before we make this particular change. One of the things I'd be very interested in seeing, and I think the board should see, is that if by right the buildings along Otis Street could all be 5 stories, what's this going to look like on that side of town? And I think it's inappropriate to put that size building there. So I really would prefer to see this passed over till we did more research on it. I see no reason to rush into it. And so I would ask that we recommend to the select board, as far as that warrant article goes, that it be passed over at this particular time.
I can,
Go ahead.
could I respond?
You can.
Yes, so I spoke with Member Ball and also with the town planner to question not asked before, but this article was referred back to the zoning subcommittee, I think that's the name, to the town planner, the community development director, Jim Ball, who serves for us, and Jason Lundberg. And at that time, they discussed mitigation for the density change and, discarded that as an option at the time, putting in the green building conditions that we have and the other site modifications in exchange or as concessions for the increased density. So if we had a proposal before us for mitigation, we might be able to talk about that, but it's abstract now. So, and then there's just sort of the opportunity cost of time. We've now passed this article over once. We gave it to the subcommittee. They came back. They put in their best thinking on it after working and deliberating on it. I think we should vote on it one way or the other. I understand that not everyone may support it, but I believe that a lot of thought has gone into this. And then with regard to mitigation, if commercial, I just think it singles this an applicant seeking to take advantage of the by right development to simply seek mitigation from an applicant in the IE overlay district kind of is it's unfair. We should be exploring mitigation and exploring what we do in zoning bylaws, but it shouldn't be limited to this particular overlay. So I'm in favor of exploring it, but there's nothing before us to consider with regard to mitigation. So I think it's a total non-starter, for now. So yeah, the option would be to pass it over, but I would, press for a vote on the article as written right now. That's just the, in principle. And then, Jim, there's the minor nit of some wording changes that we made. When I say we, consulting with Pete Dumbeck and Sustainable Westboro, we've tried to make the finding sections as ironclad, if you will, and as appropriate as possible. So with regard to LEEDs, the standard would be platinum, the highest. The structure would need to be certified, so the applicant would need to pay for certification. And we've reworded it such that it wouldn't restrict it to a particular code book, but whatever the current code is at the time the developer was seeking it. And then on the solar subsection, we found some other more exacting language, which says that the applicant can choose to put up rooftop solar, canopy solar, or a solar field, but the requirement by the town is that the solar portion should be sized to meet a target of 60% of the structure's load. So that would go to, kind of the traffic and uses of it, that the energy would be offset, and that the target energy storage component should be sized to reduce electricity exports to 10% of the total solar generation. So that ensures that the applicant not only is building solar, but is building the storage capacity to meet the needs of that particular structure on site. So those were two minor changes, which we think makes it more objective. I didn't mean to speak to the issue of mitigation. It's separate from that, but it goes to the wording in the findings themselves. So,
Pete, do you have comments?
Not at this moment, go.
So I've struggled with this a few times. I'm the one who brought up the mitigation concept, and I'm actually convinced now that we need to address mitigation formulas throughout zoning and not make it zone specific. I think that's an important thing, that, just putting mitigation formulas into this overlay doesn't address the lack of those type of formulas in the rest of zoning. And from that standpoint, I don't really object to moving this forward, but I guess my one thought that had occurred to me just tonight, and I hate to bring things in last minute, we had a Otis Street corridor study done based on the current zoning, and it feels like, his comment about what would it be like if everything went to 5 stories, it feels like that Otis Street corridor study would be obsolete. And I just wonder if we should somehow, I don't know how, find a way to get that consultant, to tell us what the impact of this change would be on that study. I don't know if that's something we should ask.
Mr. Chairman, sorry.
To what end? Play that thinking out to justify mitigation in this zone only?
No, but to justify, to see what the effect is going to be.
I understand the
All right,
point.
if we're having an Otis
Just a
Street
moment.
corridor study.
I was
then-
asking Mark. I understand his point, to restudy the maximum capacity if every builder took advantage of this overlay. But I'm saying, to what end? If they did, and if it had an impact, I think what we've seen from the traffic studies so far is that not every facility, that there is no mean or average traffic. It depends on the use of the facility. So traffic is by no means, yes, you could certainly do a study and say if everyone built to 5 stories and 50% and put in a traditional office park where people come to work, there's some maximum use
No, that's a good
typical
point.
of the use, which would give you a maximum number,
We
which
could have
no
a-
doubt would
we could
impact
have
the
a-
traffic study.
We could have a
But
five-story
to
building.
what end?
Yeah, we could have a five-story building that houses a data center, and there wouldn't
Yeah.
be very little traffic
Right,
impact.
or high-tech?
So I don't think the story height necessarily, or the site coverage necessarily translates into more traffic, but I think we need to be cognizant of traffic impacts on that.
Brings us back to mitigation, and I do agree that we need to have the formula. Hazel, you made the point, I think an accurate one, that mitigation on the east side, on the west side, depends on the project. And so and we have heard the attorneys speak to mitigation. So the scaling, the work that needs to be done to be able to propose language in the zoning bylaw update that manages this, in a fair, some sort of scale. But I guess I'm sitting here, again, the opportunity cost of time. This article was referred back in the summer. If somebody felt strongly about mitigation, we should have had some sort of study or subcommittee of it. It isn't a legitimate reason to keep delaying the article. I want to vote on the article up or down. If town meeting disagrees and votes it down, then so be it. Then we won't have to deal with it at all. We'll have IB development. But we've had reasoned process here to lead to the language in this article. And to just kick it down the road, I don't think there's justification for it right now.
So, again, as far as the mitigation goes, I do think we need to address mitigation formulas to make it so that any developer in town has a specific expectation as to what mitigation to expect, right? But passing this article or supporting this article does not mean that if somebody comes in with a five-story building, we can't ask them for mitigation. We still would, the way we would and the way we have for years. And, so that, to me, it's not like we're saying you're not going to get mitigation if this passes or if we don't include mitigation language into this. I think I would prefer to see at this point that mitigation language applied laterally, is that the right word?
Across the board, I 100% agree.
Rather than zone specific, because I think I think we need that type of language so that we can get away from negotiations with individual developers and just set expectations right from the get-go. All right, I'm not sure what other comments.
I think we should vote on it.
All right, it is still a public hearing, right? Did I ask if there were any public comments? We'll ask again. Any public comments? All right.
Just as one question.
Yeah, did you have comments?
To Westboro TV, we can't see who's in the meeting because we've lost our projection behind us and on the monitor, so we can't see who's here. Can you bring that screen back, please? Okay.
Oh,
Thank you.
my office.
All right. I think we're ready for a motion then. We need to close the public hearing first. I'll make a motion then to close the public hearing on the town meeting article on zoning bylaw, Article 4, special regulations, creating a new section 5900 industrial E.
I second that.
Okay, we have a motion to close the public hearing. Any discussion? All those in favor? All those opposed? That's 3-1 in favor of closing the hearing.
Oh, I'm sorry. I vote to close the hearing. I'm sorry.
Okay, so we're going to amend that vote to 4-0
Sorry.
in favor of closing the hearing. All right, do we have a motion?
So with regard to amending zoning bylaws, Article 4, special regulations, by creating a new section 5900 industrial E, i.e. overlay district. I move that the planning board support the article as written in the warrant.
Second that.
Okay, any discussion of the motion? All those in favor? All those opposed? 3-1 in favor of supporting the article. All right, next item on the agenda is continue public hearing on town meeting article to see if the town will amend the zoning bylaws regarding general amending the sign regulations. All right. Jim, I'll turn to you first to summarize this again for the public, and then we can further discussion. But again, this was really just left open because of the snafu at the last meeting, and we'll check in with Kristen to see if there's any public.
So very briefly, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So very briefly, the purpose of the article is to encourage the siting of commercial billboards, electronic and digital billboards in locations that do not cause driver distraction, but can provide public service announcements in emergency situations, and which can preserve the residential character of the town and protect the environmental, historic, and open space resources of the community as defined in the proposed bylaw. As you know, we have a current digital billboard in town on the Cumberland Farms property that faces the Massachusetts Turnpike. The intention of this bylaw was to create reasonable setbacks from that sign and between any new signs, protecting abutters and particularly residential abutters along the interstate highways. So this would only govern digital billboards along 495 and the Mass Pike. It would not create the opportunity for digital billboards anywhere else in town. We're only talking about the two interstate highways as they pass through Westboro. The proposed setbacks are 1,250 feet between signs, whether they're on the same side of the interstate or on the opposite side of the interstate. Also, a 500-foot buffer, 500-foot radius buffer from any residential uses, whether they're zoned residentially or zoned any other residential designation. If the property is used for residential purposes other than a hotel or a motel, there is a requirement for a 500-foot setback from those property lines. We did a study of potential locations using the one sign that exists on the Cumberland Farms property along the Massachusetts Turnpike, and found that given those minimum requirements for setbacks, the 1,250 feet between signs, 500 feet buffer from any residential property, we found that no more than 4 signs could be created along either of the highways, inclusive, which means none further on the Mass Pike, and a potential of 3 additional along 495. Additionally, you know that the state governs and permits anything that fronts along their highways. So Interstate 495 and the Mass Pike, as they pass through town, would be subject to further permitting from the state. The state also prohibits digital billboards from any properties that abut the interchanges. So that means along any of the on or off ramps, as well as the circular interchanges as they loop across to Route 9 on 495 or on the Mass Pike and 495 intersection. So that further limits the possibilities for any of these billboards. Taking those factors into considerations, we find that a total of no more than 4 signs could be possible given those dimensional setbacks, 3 on 495 and 1 that exists currently on the Massachusetts Turnpike. I should also note that the bylaw requires the town and the operator of any of these digital billboards to enter into a mutual development agreement, which would give the town the right to request public service announcements for local events in Westboro, as well as emergency announcements for police and fire and any state Amber alerts. And the operator pays the town an annual fee, which would be negotiated between the select board and the the sign operator. You should also note that the permitting authority for the town is not the planning board, but rather the zoning board of appeals. The reason for that decision, which came out of the zoning review committee, is that the ZBA has a much stricter interpretation of the zoning bylaws as opposed to what the planning board would have. They also have a greater latitude in controlling zoning. As you know, we can't give any waivers or special conditions to any zoning proposal.
Any questions from the board on this? Jim, I'm just looking at the draft warrant that's in our Dropbox. I don't know if that's the latest. Is that version?
No, it's not the latest version of our bylaw. So our bylaw is not in that warrant at this moment. The article that's there right now is a placeholder, and it only has a 1,000-foot setback. You probably noticed that. It still says 1,000.
So the motion that you suggested was I move the planning board support the article as written in the warrant. But
That's right.
The one in the warrant still says.
But this isn't the warrant. The warrant that you're looking at, warrant 7, is not the warrant that the selectmen will adopt. We will add this, if you vote this article tonight, our language will be added to the warrant, and that will be the article language in the warrant.
Kristen.
Yes.
That would be submitted to the warrant.
Yes. Oh, then I misunderstood you.
Oh, so I'm looking at version 7 of the warrant articles. Let me go back to,
Is the file name TM 2022 amend zoning bylaws section 3340 off-premise? Doc X, and it's 2.11. Okay.
okay. So as long as that language with the 1,250 feet is what's going to be put in the warrant, that's, I just want to make sure.
Yes, that will be inserted in the warrant, as well as all of town council's corrections. And we've had, you probably see there are a couple people in the meeting this evening that are interested in this article, and they've also received the most recent language, which includes the 1,250 separation and any of town council's comments.
Okay. All right. Other questions? Anything from the public? Yeah, well,
You want comments from the board, or do you want to?
yeah, no, please.
One of the purposes of this change in the design, the sign bylaw, is to preserve the residential character of the town and protect the environmental, historical, and open space resources of the community. I feel very strongly that this particular, the need for, that I don't think this town needs digital billboards on the interstate 495. I can see that these bylaws could deal with signs on Route 9. I think there probably do need to be some changes as to the digital language, or the digital format of the signs on Route 9, because there's so many technological changes, and I understand that. But I feel that billboards on 495 will impact the character of our town, and I see no reason for them. So I'm not in favor of this, and I'll vote against it.
Any other comments? Any further discussion? All right, and I didn't hear anybody from the public. Think so, okay. All right, we have a motion?
Do we need to close a public hearing?
We do, thank you, Tim. I'll make a motion to close the public hearing on the sign bylaws.
Second that.
Okay, any discussion of that motion? All those in favor? That's 4-0 to close the hearing. Go ahead, Tim.
Okay. So with regard to amending zoning bylaws, amend zoning bylaws, Article 3, General Regulations, Section 3300, Sign Regulations, subsection 3340, off-premise signs. I move the planning board support the article as written in the warrant.
second. Any discussion of the motion? All those in favor? All those opposed? 3-1 in favor. All right, next item on the agenda is a continued public hearing on town meeting article, amend the zoning bylaws, Article 2, district regulations, use regulation schedule for open uses in M and M1 districts. Again, Jim, just a real quick summary for those watching, and then we'll see if there's any comments or public comments.
Sure. So the existing zoning bylaws regulate open uses in the use schedule, the regulatory use schedule, section 2300 of the zoning bylaws. And under open uses, we have two lines set aside, one for cemeteries and one for recreational uses operated by a governmental body. And in the M district, which represents state and municipal uses, and the M1 district, which is exclusive municipal uses, both of those uses are not allowed by right. So the proposed change is to allow both cemeteries and municipal recreational uses by right in the M and the M1 districts. The reason for this is that currently, as you know, we have many recreational uses, many recreational ball fields not associated with an educational use. If it's an educational use like at our schools, they're exempt from zoning by the Dover Amendment. But if it's a recreational field like the Little League field or some other soccer or even pickleball court out at Lake Chauncey, currently those are non-conforming uses. Cemeteries. So we have multiple cemeteries in town that exist on town-owned property. As a matter of fact, we have a new cemetery out on Nurse Street. Those would be non-conforming uses under the existing zoning. So our proposal is to change that designation to allow those uses by right in the M and the M1 districts, so that in the future, if any recreational use needs a site plan review, they would be eligible for that site plan review.
All right, first for the board, any questions or comments on the proposed change M and M1? Anything from the public? Okay, I'll make a
motion to close the public hearing.
Okay, I'll second that. Any discussion? All those in favor of closing the public hearing, that's 4-0.
Ready?
Yep.
So with regard to amending zoning bylaws, amend zoning bylaws, Article 2, District Regulations, Section 2300, Use Regulation Schedule for Open Uses in the M and M1 districts. I move that the Planning Board support the article as written in the warrant.
Second. Any discussion? All those in favor? And that's 4-0 in favor. All right, next item on the agenda, vote to support town meeting warrant article 11 master plan implementation. Jim, again, I think we all know what this is, but I just want a summary for the public.
Yeah, we kept that on the agenda, but you actually acted on this one at your last meeting. You voted unanimously to support the articles written in the warrant. And the article basically states that we're requesting $16,000, which I think is a very small amount of money, to have a consultant run up to 5 public meetings with 2 members of the consulting team to help our master plan implementation phase get off the ground. They would basically help the committee, once it's formed, prioritize their primary goals and help the committee understand how to deliberate and weight or value the most important goals of the master plan, after which time would probably be 6 months to 8 months, they would let go of our hand and the committee would be on their own. So the $16,000 would be intended for us to seek consulting services to provide several meetings for the Master Plan Implementation Committee and help them get started. And I'll have a presentation for this at town meeting.
Any questions for Jim on that? So we don't need to take action.
You already did.
Old business, new business. Do we have any meeting minutes? And I think we just discussed the master plan implementation committee and this. Else we need to discuss there. And the Housing Choice Act, I think. Oh, Jim was able to reach out to CMRPC and request technical assistance, which they've
Right.
agreed to.
I think that's going to be very valuable to us.
Analysis of MBTA. Well, an analysis of the MBTA community zoning and where that would be, so saving us some money there.
Well, and getting the benefit of the regional.
Exactly, it's more than just money.
Response, right,
It's more than
to-
just cost savings, but it's good to have, considering we pay, the town pays.
It's always good to save some money twice.
Well, considering the town pays money into CMRPC,
Right.
we're getting something back.
Right.
That's
Yep.
always good. So,
Yep.
I see no other business. Is there anything else?
We had reached out to the Select Board to have them appoint a member to our Housing Choice Study Committee, and they did that. That's Patrick Welch, will represent the Select Board. We also reached out to the Department of Public Works, and Chris Payne said that Derek Sari will represent the DPW. I had sent out an email and asked that we take a look at a couple dates. I know Marky responded. I need to hear back from the others as well. I had initially asked for next week. I know those the dates that I asked, which I think were the 24th and the 26th, you said worked for you. I haven't heard back from DPW or the Select Board yet, so.
Copied on that? Yes. All right. Okay, so once we have that, we'll set a meeting on that. All right, any other business then, Jim?
I have no further business. Just to keep in mind, at our next meeting, we will have the continuation of the public hearing for 9 Otis Street and any town warrant articles that you wish to review. We will shortly be receiving a couple site plan reviews for a project out on Connector Road, I'm sorry, out on Research Drive, and another project on Otis Street. Stay tuned.
All right, no other business, then
I'd make a motion to adjourn our meeting.
Second.
any discussion? All those in favor of adjournment? That is 4-0 in favor of adjourning tonight's meeting. All right, thank you, guys. Have a great night.